get started. Michelle or Anna, if one of you can monitor just the waiting room and allow people in while thank you. All right, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Minor Renovation and Repair Resources and Support webinar. First off, I just want to take a moment to thank all of you for all of the work you do day in, day out to care for and educate the children in our county and to support all the parents. We know you all work hard and just so appreciate all of what you do. My name is Rowena Camo. I am the Senior Program Administrator for ECE at First 5 Alameda, and I'm joined by my two amazing colleagues, Michelle and Anna, and I'll give them the floor to introduce themselves.
Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to be here with you this evening, and really humbly, we're not the experts here, but wanted to create a forum of support to encourage you to apply for these funds, which we know so many of you sorely need. So we hope you will find this helpful. We don't have all the answers, but we have set up the evening to try to at least provide some TA and point you in the right directions of where to get answers.
Hi, good afternoon or good evening. My name is Anna Roskiza. I'm a Senior Administrator with First 5 Alameda County. And looking forward to convening with this group this evening to share some thinking about how Alameda County can tap into some of these much needed resources, and hoping that some of this information can be useful and shared within the county. So looking forward to that. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. All right. So again, we're happy that all of you could join us this evening. So I'm sure you all have had some really long days. And just want to echo what Anna and Michelle have said, in that we hope that you find the resources and information shared this evening helpful in submitting your grant application. And just want to emphasize too that we are not the experts, and we're here to share available information and resources to support your application that we want to encourage you to apply. Tonight, this is a rundown of what we'll be covering related to the renovation and repair requests for applications, specifically for centers. So just some general information about the RFA, examples of allowable uses. We'll walk through the prioritization as it's stated in the RFA, and then we'll go through a sample application walkthrough. And then we'll close out with some application reminders and resources. So what we will not cover. So there are answers to many of the questions that we or our local R&R partners do not have answers for, and that the state has not yet clarified. So, we might not be able to answer all of the questions you have this evening, but we will collect the questions. We'll save them in the chat. So please utilize the chat to enter in all questions that you have. We'll make sure to save those at the end of the evening, and we'll be compiling like a Q&A and then following up with the state for any of the questions that we were not able to answer or have not yet been clarified. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michelle to go over the general information. You're muted, Michelle.
Okay. So general information for the application is in terms of who should apply. So these funds are federal funds that have been made available for all licensed childcare centers and licensed family childcare homes that have been licensed on or before August 1st, 2021, so last August. Non-eligible agencies, according to the state criteria, are local educational agencies such as offices of ed, school districts, charter schools, and community colleges. Funds were made available separately for those entities. Public or government entities are not eligible, and contractors not in good standing. So if you're a state preschool contractor and you have some kind of contracting issue with the state, you would not be eligible for these funds. The grants are available to preserve or enhance existing childcare spaces for children ages birth to 5 by addressing the needs related to health and safety, licensing, disasters, or the pandemic. Grant funding could include reimbursements for expenses back to August 1st, 2021. And we'll talk more about that later. The applicant has, the applicants are going to have proof of site control, and that they'll need to continue to provide care for a period of 4 years for centers and 2 years for family childcare homes following the notification of the grant award. So, and then just a reminder, this is a grant, not a loan. It's not repayable. Licensed centers can request up to $249,999 $1,000, and you don't have to request the full amount, but that's the up to amount. The applications are due March 25th, at the end of the night. I would not wait until the end of the night. I might not even want to wait until March 25th, but that is the closing date for the applications. And then there's a link there that Anna will also drop in the chat for you. And then I would just say, because I know this comes up in webinars like this, is that we're going to put things in the chat. Post this webinar, we will make a recording of the webinar available to you, so that if you had other folks at your organization you wanted to share it with, or if you wanted to go back and review something, and also the slide deck, so that all these slides that we're sharing with you will also be available to you. So just in terms of examples of allowable uses for repair and renovation, and you'll see these also in the application itself. There's just places to check what kinds of projects you want. But just to give you an idea, it's not major repair and renovation. It's more minor repair and renovation. So what is included, these are just some examples: classroom upgrades such as new painting, or project management costs for larger projects, fixed equipment, washers, dryers, refrigerators, industrial stoves, dishwashers, other stoves, non-fixed equipment, plumbing and filtration, architectural, water leak mitigation, retrofitting, hazard testing and mitigation, security systems, inspections, plan checking, green building standard upgrades. So there's just a fees that are associated with, depending on the kind of site that you're in. So if you lease from a school district, and you have to pay fees for that. Next slide. So everything from bathroom modifications, partitions, sinks and appliances, permanent or portable sinks or hand washing stations, portable high efficiency particulate air like HEPA or ultraviolet light air purifiers, HVAC, sanitation, equipment. Cribs are an allowable. This kind of was surprising to me, but cribs, I think partly because there's some hope that folks are adding infant toddler care, so cribs are an allowable use, but you have to make sure you're buying the right cribs that are allowable. Security systems and monitoring for pickup and drop off, generators, outdoor space, playgrounds, landscaping, ADA, and many more types of projects. So you may know best what kinds of things are needed at your site or sites. Next slide. Unallowable costs, major renovation and structural changes, libraries, staff rooms, and other areas of renovation that don't directly serve children are listed as unallowable. I think we would argue they should be, that's part of quality of care, but those are specifically excluded from these funds. Building acquisition is not allowable. In-house labor is not allowable, and technology systems are, and there's a few others, but those are the ones that jumped out at me to include here. So in-house labor, meaning you might have a project where you could apply for materials and supplies, but it's a small enough project that you have someone to do the project, but that's in-house, but you can't charge those costs to the grant. You would be really offering the labor in kind. Next slide. So from the state webinar, we lifted some of the initial prioritization, and then there's sort of a secondary set of prioritization. And in those webinar slides, you could also see there's more detail about prioritization. We encourage you to understand the prioritization process because you want to frame your application and tie it to these prioritizations. That's your strategy, to tell your story in a way that you get yourself prioritized. And I would say because these are ARPA funds and the state needs to move the money quickly, that's one reason why you're seeing some of this initial prioritization. So projects that can be completed in 120 days, projects where there's no permitting requirement or it's already in advanced stages of the permitting process. So you already have, we know how long permitting can take. Projects with quick timelines or that are only requesting equipment. So if it's equipment only, that's going to be kind of low-hanging fruit for the state to approve and allow. The second layer of prioritization process that they will look at is, does your project mitigate health and safety issues and decrease the risk of licensing violations or revocations? So I'm sure you all know there's many facilities related things where you could tie it to, if we don't fix this, it puts us in a position of having a licensing citation, or could lead to revocation if it's a health and safety issue. So framing your repairs and renovations in that way could be really helpful. Programs the other layer of prioritization is programs that serve state subsidized children and or higher numbers of low-income families. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, the income criteria and how you can demonstrate how you serve low-income families. Programs that are in areas with a demonstrated shortage of licensed care, and programs serving infants and toddlers. So next slide.
All right, so next we're gonna do an application walkthrough. So we'll actually kind of do a mock application and kind of go through step by step. Yeah, and we'll go through step by step. So if you give me a second, I'm gonna cue that up for us. All right, let me share my screen again. Can you all see my screen okay? All right, so I am on the minor renovation and repairs website of the Department of Social Services. So this is the, I think Anna might have put this link in the chat, but this has, the background on the grant, and then as well as additional information and resources. You'll see at the bottom here is where you can access the application. So there's one for child care providers that provides, and then the two are for family child care providers. On the one for SENS. When you click on that, it's going to take you to this low income investment fund website where the actual, just say my internet connection is unstable. Please let me know if I'm cutting out, where you'll apply where the actual application lives. Okay, thanks, Michelle. I'll try and go slow. So I've already created an account, but it'll prompt you to sign in and create an account. I do want to point out a really cool feature is that you can collaborate on this application. So if you or maybe a colleague of yours will be working on the application together, you can click on this link here that says invite collaborators, and you can enter in their email address. and invite them to the application. So in tonight's walkthrough, Michelle created an application for us and had invited me as a collaborator. And I do want to say one important thing for those, if you do invite someone to collaborate with you on the application, they will receive an email to collaborate, and they'll click get started. And it's really important for this person to save this email and use this link to access the application. If they go back to the Department of Social Services website and access the application from there, it will start it will take them to a blank application and not the one that was created for collaboration. So just a note that for those who are collaborating, to use the email that you receive from, it'll be from Submittable, and use that link every time you want. If you leave and you come back to work on the application, please use the link in the email.
And Rowena, maybe this is a good time also, because we had a session on Tuesday night where there were some center providers there, and we heard some questions about when you have multiple sites. And a clarification is that you have to complete the application for each site, and it'll ask you for your full budget for all of childcare, for not just one site, but you're submitting an application per site, and you can't start another application with your email address until you finish one. So you have to do it in a series, is how we have been, how it was clarified for us from LIF.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, so here is our mock application. You can see here in this top right corner, these are actually folks that I'm collaborating with, and I can see that they're here on the application. So it's nice, it helps with version control, and it'll actually show like if one of them is in answering a question, so that I don't go in there and try to answer the same question. All right. So just some general information about the application and due date. All right. So this first section here is about your childcare center, about your organization. So I'll go through this fairly quickly. My kids and I are watching Encanto, so there's a lot of references to Encanto in this mock application. So you'll want to put your organization name and then your legal business name as it appears on your tax documents or a W-9 form. For the address in this section, it is the main or administrative office for your childcare center. So you may have multiple centers, multiple center locations. Please use the administrative office, the main office that, for this section. Okay, there's phone number, and then there's a main program email address, website, and then the name of the executive director or CEO. In this case, it's Mirabel Madrigal, and their phone number, and then there's the email address for the executive director or CEO. It does give you an option to enter in another contact, a main contact, if it's different than the executive director. So feel free to add this in. We don't have a second main contact, so I'm leaving that blank. And I'll mention too, in terms of saving, the application automatically saves as you're entering your information. There's sometimes a green square that pops up at the top of the application that says like draft saved. So it is saving. If you want, you could also, take screenshots. That might be helpful, just to make sure that you save the information, that you yourself have documented the information that you saved, in case you want to do that. Okay. And then in this section, you'll select your organization type. If you're a nonprofit organization, you'll need to include the name and title of 2 of your organization's current board members. So that's listed down here. And then, that box disappears if you're a for-profit business or, maybe you're tribal. There's the draft saved if you all saw that. Yeah. So you'll choose your organization type and then add the board members as necessary if you chose nonprofit.
Rowena, there's a question in the chat about can you go back and make corrections? And you can. That's really like a great feature of this. You can go in and out of this doc and continue to edit it and make changes or add documents until you submit it. But once you submit it, then you're kind of locked out. So make sure, just be mindful of that, but you can edit the doc.
Yes. Okay, and then the last question in this section is to put in the number of licensed childcare sites that your organization operates. So for our example here tonight, we have 3 licensed childcare sites. And then it goes into the project information. So we have 3 sites. And in this case, as Michelle said earlier, you're submitting 1 application per site where you have a project. So if I have 3 licensed childcare sites, I will be and have projects at each of those sites, I will be submitting 3 separate applications for each of those sites. So for this application, for this project, we are working at Little Encanto West. So you want to specify the name of the center or site. And then the address, the project address, site address, county, and then you'll want to indicate the facility ownership status, if you own it, if you lease it. And then the total project cost. And should say too, like there could be multiple projects at one site. So you'll want to list the total cost of all of those projects at that site. So in this example, our total project cost is $25,000 for all the projects, but in our grant amount request, we're only asking for $15,000. And just want to highlight, Michelle had shared earlier that the total, I think, amount that you can request is $249,999. So in my example, our projects are not huge. Okay, and then in this line here, you'll want to submit the annual childcare program operating budget. And just want to note this, it's for all programs and sites. So not just the one site that you've provided the information on, it is for all of the programs and sites. So you'll put that in here. And then you'll complete this table below on the indoor square footage. And there's this nice little feature here where if you click on it, it expands the table so you can see the full text of the in each of the rows. So we'll just say our indoor square footage is 2,000 and our outdoor. And then you'll notice it auto-fills and auto-calculates for you down at the bottom for your total square footage. And that is of the current facility. And then in the next table is regarding your current capacity. I'm going to go ahead and open this table so that you can see the full text. So here it's asking for program capacity. And this first line is your current licensed capacity. So the capacity that is listed on your license. And there's a space for infants, toddlers, and preschool and school age. So I'll just put something here for preschool, say I'm licensed for 24. And then there's a line for your current enrollment, which may be less than your licensed capacity. Should note, I believe it's here where you want to put, like, you may have an AM or PM or an AM and PM program. So your enrollment might be larger because you have kids enrolled in your AM and then your PM program, and they're two separate kids. So for our current enrollment, I'm just going to put 10. And then the number of, you would list the number of classrooms. Again, it's auto saving for me. And then auto fills on the total on the right.
And I would remind us that these funds are intended for 0 to 5. So you might have school age space that's shared space, like hallways or something, but and you can report your school age, but the state is really looking to fund renovation and repair for 0 to 5-year-olds.
And then I'm going to hand it over to Michelle to go through the next sections.
So part of the prioritization process is whether you serve low-income and subsidized families, and the application allows you to report the categories that you serve in. You may or may not be aware of some of the program status. If you take vouchers, for you, it may not be known to you, like whether that's a CalWorks family or whether it's a CAP family. If you're a state contractor, you know the number of children enrolled under your state contract. But I would, fill this out as best you do know, and also I would note that this is asking for the number of currently served subsidized children, and we know that some sites historically have served subsidized children and may not have those enrollments now. I would note that in your program description, in your application, because they're asking for this confirmation here. But if you have historically served subsidized families, you're going to want to make sure that when they're reviewing your application, they know that. And could you scroll down a little more where I went on? And there's also questions here about children with children affected by natural disasters. So there's places in the state, where there were fire burnouts and flooding, and that's what they're looking for there. There's programs with spaces funded through documented internal scholarships. So see that line, the third. Many of you may do your own scholarships for low-income families, and if those low-income families meet the state subsidy eligibility, and we'll present that later in this presentation, you should document that you do that. So there's an awareness that there's a lot of low-income families that don't get served through the state subsidy programs, and that many of you are serving them in other ways. So if you can document how you, if you have other local subsidies, or you might have military subsidies, or if you yourself in this line have spaces that you scholarship, that you fundraise for in scholarship or otherwise, have reduced fees or tuition, that you can report that here. And then on this next section, just very simply, they want to know how many slots will be preserved as part of this renovation and repair. And so obviously you want to be clear about the impact of the renovation and repair on your licensed capacity. And if it's all your slots, it's all your slots. If it's just for your younger kids, you can report that. And then the number of jobs preserved, they're really talking about your staff, like how many, like if you're making, and this is for their own reporting to be able to say this when they granted, like how many slots were preserved, how many staff jobs were impacted, etc. So the priority factors, again, we talked about this in the previous slide, but this, you can go through these and really check all that apply, that where you can speak to how it relates to your project. And then back to Rowena's point, earlier, that you might have multiple projects in a single site, and there's the opportunity for you in the narrative to explain that. And those projects, some might be, you bought a stove last, October, and you want to renovate the bathroom with these funds as soon as you get them, and you're this far along in your process. So you can make proposals like that, and it's also possible that you would get funded for part of your application and not the whole thing. This is a competitive grant across the state, and that will be part of their rating, depending on all of those prioritizations. And there's a place here where you have the opportunity to say, I serve large numbers of low-income families. So you might serve large number of low-income families even though they're not all subsidized. And again, later in this presentation, we have like the income standards for low-income families that the state uses for subsidy eligibility. And if you are serving a high number of low-income families, you should be checking that box, because that's one of the prioritizations. And so for use of funds, again, these are to preserve, enhance, or expand existing childcare spaces. You might be converting a classroom from preschool to infant toddler care. And then the examples, they want you just to check the examples of the kinds of repair and renovation that you're doing. So that's pretty self-explanatory. You can scroll down. I saw some questions in the chat about the 120 days, and also there's an issue about getting bids for your projects, and we know it's hard to get contractors right now. The state's aware of that, but we'll get to that in a bit. But the 120 days, you're really trying to ensure that you can turn around the project in a long time, that this shouldn't be a major repair and renovation that can't be completed. So these are examples of emergency mitigation, examples of COVID-related modifications, and wherever you're requesting funds, just make sure that when you're checking here that you're including related cost estimates in your budget, your project budget that you're submitting.
Okay. So I'm going to go over the next section around project readiness. So the application asks you to read through the various project stages, which are listed below, and select where you believe your project best fits. We understand you might have multiple projects at the site. So, I think like read through each of the stages and, select the one I think that like best fits or best describes like the majority of the projects that you have. So you might have some that are early stage, you might have a bunch that are, in the mid stage. So again, just, think about the projects that you have, read through the descriptions, and make your best estimation on which one it would fall into. There's a space for you.
And they're not asking you to do that for each project, they're asking to do it overall. So Rowan, I'm going to talk through this, like that might be tricky for you. So just use your best, encourage you to use your best judgment. And if there's a bunch of your project that's short term and others that's going to take, that more fits that final stage project, you might want to put something in the middle because it's a mix of the two. So
Yeah, and I see a question in the chat around would final stage be for a project that was completed after August 2021. So if it's after that August 2021 date, and you're seeking reimbursement for that, I would say that would fall under final stage. So you can select the construction start date and then the anticipated completion date. And just note here that you can skip if your project is not construction related. They provide a space for you to provide more details and an explanation about not being able to complete your project within 120 days. So, provide as much detail as you can as to the reason why. And then, as Michelle said, you can only select one for the projects that you are including, that you're taking on for your site. So select the one that fits. And then, so this next section is around application attachments. And like it says, it'll vary based on the project that you have. So there are 16 different sections where you will need to attach documents. And it's pretty, I think it's a pretty straightforward kind of system to add files or upload. So the first is a narrative description of the project or projects for which you're seeking funding. You can see here to include the project scope, timeline, and fund development and budget activities. Want to note here that you can select up to 10 files to attach, and the different types of files that are acceptable. So a Word document or a PDF, and it is a 1-page minimum or 2-page maximum.
And I would just add, having been on panels where you're reviewing these kinds of applications, if you're reviewing hundreds of applications, like the clearer and more succinct you can be, the better. Like, don't feel like you have to get all flowery and like cut to the chase, be on point, explain your project, tell your story, but don't feel like you have to take up that 2-page maximum. By the time these reviewers are reading their 49th, 100th application, that they're going to appreciate you just being to the point.
Mm-hmm. And then the second, narrative description to describe your agency's mission, vision, and history. To Michelle's point, take this time this is where you can tell your story, the families you serve, the mission of your childcare center, of your preschool. Really take that time to add that into this narrative, your program mission. I think it's in here that you can also talk about the children that you serve, particularly if they are, low-income children that you're serving. You can, we'll talk a little bit about this later around, we can provide some data and information for you to include in this section around, high need zip codes that you might be serving that might be helpful for your application. Okay, third, you'll want to upload lease or rental agreement, any of these documents here, and that, and that the lease or rental agreement, and a letter from your landlord if you are renting or have a lease, that it will continue through the term of the grant, and that's 2 years for family childcare. For childcare centers, that's 4 years. So again, you can choose the file and upload. If you're leasing or renting a property, written approval from the property owner for any of the renovations, if that's applicable. So there's also a box here. So if you don't have anything that is like a huge renovation or that is a renovation, you can select this checkbox, and that says that you're waiving this requirement because the project is equipment related or the changes don't impact the property.
Yeah, I see a question about if you're having difficulty getting the landlord commitment. I wouldn't let that hold up your application, I would explain that it was taking time and submit the application on time, and that's the kind of thing I think that they would look at working with you on. But you would need to get it prior to receiving grant funds.
I was going to highlight too, I saw we have a question in the chat from Beatrice about fund development. What is meant by fund development? And I think, so I looked just quickly through the guidance and the FAQs for the grant application process, and they don't have a definition of fund development. They mentioned that you should speak to it, but that does seem like a question that I wouldn't be surprised if folks in this group or in this webinar had asked that and received a response from the state in terms of what to include in that section. Kind of pitching it to the group.
Yeah, I know there was some reference about like looking favorably on grant proposals and applications that where there was some contribution being brought to the grant, so that if you did some outside fundraising, showing how you did that outside fundraising, I think would be one example of that, maybe not the only one. And appreciate your ask of the group on it in case anybody else has thoughts about the fund development piece.
Yeah. Okay. And I see a question about whether these files, is it per location or the entire organization? Believe this would be for the location that you're submitting the project.
Yeah. So this whole application is for a single site.
Yes. And so, yeah, for the single site. All right.
There was a question earlier about the square footage and what you should be reporting, and I think you can report your licensing, or if your proposal is to add space that wasn't usable space before, but you're trying to add it to increase your outdoor capacity, especially to increase social distancing of kids, etc., like that, you would just report that in your square footage.
And then number 5 covers your license, the facility license for the project site. So you want to actually upload a screenshot or a PDF of your actual license. And you'll notice here you can upload a picture. It allows JPEGs. These are kind of picture files, so you can definitely take a picture of your phone, upload that there. And then there's a space to enter your license, your facility number for each of the licenses that you have for that site. So your site might have, an infant license and a preschool license. You'll want to enter both in the appropriate spaces. Okay. Number 6. To upload one of the following, either an annual audit, current unaudited financials, your Schedule K1, or your most recent tax return, Schedule C. Number 7, because these are federal funds, your organization needs to be registered with the System for Award Management to do business with the federal government to receive these funds. And they have a nice little link here to go to the website. So you click on it, it opens a new tab so you don't lose where your application is. And then it takes you to sam.gov. So you do need to register. And you might not, it takes a few, I think it takes about 10 days. I've heard it vary from different providers. So, definitely start this early. You don't need to have it like, what's it called? For the application, what you need to submit is proof that you have registered. So this could be the email confirmation that you received from sam.gov. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later on in the presentation. Just some kind of proof that you have registered. It might not yet be active in the system, but you do want to show that you have registered.
Yeah, on the state webinar, they were clear that they're aware that it might take time for you to get your actual SAM number. But this is one of the things you want to do early, is get your DUNS and get your SAM. We'll talk about that more in the presentation, but like that, this is an important step. And so getting a picture of a screenshot of, your completed application for SAM is proof that you have applied.
Number 8, if you are your organization is a non-public entity, you must be registered with the Secretary of State and provide proof. So you can click on this link here and it'll take you to the California Secretary of State website, where you can, access and print proof of your active status or register. And then, this can be waived if your organization is a public entity. Number 9, if the applicant is registered as a nonprofit that has tax exempt status, then you want to show proof of the 501c3 status. And if you need to look that up, you can go, they provide the website, access to the website here, and you can look that up, and then you'll want to upload that file.
And make sure you're waiving if it doesn't apply to you.
Yes, waive it if it does not apply to you. Thanks, Michelle. For number 10, if you are a non-governmental entity, you'll need to submit a payee data record, the STD 204. You'll need to complete that. So you can get a blank form here. And I just want to, when we were walking through this, I found it really helpful to actually download the form and fill it out. So it looks like you can fill it out here on the website. But it's not a guarantee that it will save. And so I think my recommendation would just be to download the form. And there's like a download button, and you can download it there and then fill it out. It does ask for a signature. So, you may need to print it out, sign it, and then, you could probably take a picture of it. And then, you can take a picture of it and then upload it to to your application. So again, it can be a PDF, or here, again, a JPEG or a picture file is fine. So you can take a picture of it with your phone after you've signed it and then upload it. One feature that I thought was really cool was when you choose a file to upload, which I've uploaded this one, it tells you how many more files you can add. So that happens for each of the sections. Number 11, around project design, they would like you to upload any architectural renderings or drawings made by a contractor or playground contractor. Just note at the bottom, you can check these boxes if you don't have them yet and you're in the process of getting the drawings, not ready to submit, or if your project does not require architectural renderings or drawings, you'll want to check that box. Michelle, I think you have the next section.
I have the pleasure of bids. So they recommend 3 bids for your project for each, and you need separate bids for the different project scopes. So if you're remodeling a bathroom and you're doing a playground, you need your multiple bids for each of those. 3 is recommended, 2 is required. And we know, this in the early webinars related to these grants, this was raised for the state, like how hard it is to get contractors' bids right now, and then also supply chain issues. So you're, do your best efforts, and they will, there will be a push for them to require them. And there's a whole lot of things around using, about how you use contractors and allowable contractors. And just make sure you're reading that. It really depends on whether the scope of your project and whether you're going to have to use, like, and how permitting's required in the city that you live may vary from where you live. But just, I would strongly recommend you reading through these sections around construction.
And I just wanted to highlight this example around construction. I think it's a good one. So, if you plan to renovate a bathroom and also have upgrades done to the outdoor learning environment, so you'll need, you would need the 2 bids for the bathroom remodel, as well as 2 bids for the outdoor playground. So it would be a total of 4 bids that you would need to get for this application. So 2 for each project.
And then there you're updating or uploading your bids. And just recognizing, this is it's a difficult place right now, especially if y'all are trying to get bids at the same time. I actually had a home project that I needed to have done, and I tried to get bids, and I was so excited. I was like, I can actually share that I got bids, and then the first contractor didn't show up, and the second one did. So, I think it's just like try to plug at it. And again, if you're needing bids, you try early, and that would be one of the things you'd want to do early.
And I just want to acknowledge, so Joni's question around, so bids, we need to upload the 4 bids. So yes, you want to upload all related construction equipment bids, and you want to upload them as separate files.
And then for equipment, if you say in their instructions, they've clarified that, so you could go to like home if you were looking for refrigerators, or even other equipment that is more for a larger facilities. If you had a catalog or a website, you could take a screenshot of the price and upload those as 2 price comparisons to show what the cost is. So you can do it. That's your equipment bid is really just a price snapshot from a supplier. And then this is a description of, they're looking for your operating budget, your project budget, and then your grant budget. So the assumption is that your project budget may be larger than the grant funding you're requesting. So this goes back to, are you paying for it with some of your state contract money, or are you paying for it with some other fundraised money, or are you partly through your project and you're applying for just those costs since August 1. So here's the place where you then, and then on your project budget, it's saying the applicant can upload their own construction development fundraising budget or download a budget template here. So they give you an option. And then for your grant budget, the applicant must use the attached grant budget template here. So for when you're submitting your grant budget, make sure you use their template. And it's a very simple template. It's just an Excel sheet with lines on it for you to fill in each project. Joni, you're asking about air purifying system and disinfections. Yes, those are things. Those are projects that you could, or equipment that you could request funding for. The question about how do you retroactively go back and get multiple bids for projects that you've already completed, we do not have an answer for that. I actually asked that question in the state webinar, and it has not appeared in FAQs since.
Yeah, what I said was we would encourage folks to submit your application, share the bids that you have, articulate this is a request for reimbursement that of work that's already been completed with the bids that you received, and just articulate that and potentially hope to work with the state if they want to see another bid or something like that. Just at least get the application in there. It gives you the opportunity to get your foot in the door in terms of potentially receiving funding, especially given that we don't have clear guidance in terms of how to navigate that situation.
Thanks, Anna. So those are, this next is reimbursement for work already completed. So invoices, et cetera, copies of checks. And then they're asking you to take before photos of the school, of your center. And they want to make sure that you're including both exterior and the front and outdoor areas. And then also pictures of full rooms, especially the areas that you're seeking funding. So, typically, like, they might go out and look at this stuff, but they're not going to be able to do that for every project. So this is also a chance for them to do before and after photos once the renovations are completed. But even if you're not doing exterior work, I would follow these instructions about getting exterior photos. And then just more, any other documents that they're suggesting here. Then Verona, you want to do the demographic?
Yeah, so we are almost done. So this next section is about demographic information, and they provide instruction that to answer these questions for the executive director or CEO. And you may also select prefer not to answer for any of these questions, and these will not impact your grant award. So select your age range, if you have disability as defined under the Disability Discrimination Act. So it has information here on what that is. Military status, gender, your race, select all that apply. Again, there's the prefer not to answer for all of these if you prefer not to. Ethnicity and identifying as a member of the LGBTQ+ community. And then the last section here is around general assurances and certifications, and there's the attestation of compliance. So by checking each of these boxes, you attest that, yes, this project preserves, enhances, expands spaces for children ages birth to 5. Yes, grant funds are necessary to undertake this project. That the applicant has site control through the 4-year term of the grant and intends to serve children birth to 5. That with the funding, project will not have funding gaps and construction can be immediately started. That you'll obtain all the necessary approvals and permits for the proposed project, and that you'll comply with all state and federal statutes, etc. And then there's a space at the bottom for the electronic signature, which is you typing your name. Typing your name serves as the electronic signature. And then don't forget I agree with terms of use. And then as Michelle said, you double check, make sure you have everything completed, you have all your documents uploaded before submitting the application. Because once you submit it, it's locked. And we'll go over there. We'll go over it in a little bit, but I mean, there might be a case where you do need to add something, or there was a mistake, and you can email the state. But you know, I would say make sure like measure twice, cut once. Like,
Yeah,
you know, make sure you
there's
have
a
all
way,
the
there's a way to
information
do it,
in
but you
there.
don't want to have to do it.
Yeah. So yeah, so that is the walkthrough. Hopefully that was helpful for folks. And we're going to go back to the presentation. Okay. And let me share my screen again. Okay. Here we go. So just some application reminders. Wanted to share with folks just some key eligibility. So this is not a full list. We just wanted to pull out some of the highlights for the full eligibility criteria. You'll want to read through pages 3 to 5 in the RFA. So, you know, wanted to highlight that you must be a licensed childcare facility, that you serve low-income communities, and in a later slide we'll talk about the definition of low-income communities. It does, yeah, we'll talk about the definition of low-income communities. That eligible programs are those that might have spaces funded through an internal scholarship. So Michelle touched on that earlier. If you either through a local subsidy or your program scholarships, families, you know, that's another eligibility piece. That you currently provide or that you plan to provide subsidized childcare and development and preschool program services. I think Anna had put in the chat kind of the various programs, state subsidized programs.
And
Yeah.
I would say if you historically haven't taken voucher children, partly because the rates were low, the state has done some adjustment to the rate issue, and you know, being open to serving subsidized children is definitely going to be thematic around a lot of things that come down from the feds, and potentially even for resources locally. So I would just encourage you to be thinking about that for your program.
And then lastly, that your child care center will provide services for 4 years following notification of the grant award. Some more reminders around the SAM number. Again, you know, we had mentioned it might take up to 10 days for your SAM number to become active. You can still submit your application by showing proof or uploading proof of registration. So you could take a screenshot of your completed registration. You can submit your confirmation email. All of those would be, you could upload to show proof of registration. With regard to bids, for equipment and appliances, 2 bids are required. And these could be screenshots of the item with the cost visible from the various, you know, retailer websites. And again, so it's 2 bids for each equipment or appliance that you're purchasing. So if I'm purchasing a refrigerator, I need 2 bids for that refrigerator. If I'm also doing a washer and dryer, I need 2 bids for that as well. So for those 2 items that I'm purchasing, it's 2 bids for each. So just want to make sure that that's clear. And then for construction, 3 bids are recommended, but 2 bids are required for construction costs. And then just wanted to highlight as well that grant funding could potentially include reimbursement for expenses back to August 1st, 2021. One more application reminder so as you saw, the application is done through this online portal. Again, you know, start early. You can always, you know, it doesn't have to be done in one sitting. You can always, enter stuff in, go back, and, if you need to get some documents and come back to your application to add those documents. Want to note again that if you are a collaborator and choose to use that feature, to be sure that you use the link in the collaboration email or invite that was sent to you from Submittable. That is the link you want to use as a collaborator. Again, confirm that it's complete before submitting. You want to make sure, double check that you have everything needed. Once you submit, the portal will generate a confirmation message and email once it's submitted. And so this is what we were kind of referring to earlier, that if you submit your application before all documents have been submitted, you can request your application to be reopened and indicate the reason for the reopening of the application. So the email is here. And this needs to happen before the application deadline. Once the deadline passed, you cannot request to reopen your application. That all needs to happen beforehand, before the application deadline. Again, we would encourage you to get it, to make sure you have all your documentation there before submitting. Wouldn't be in a good position to have to, wait to hear back from the folks at the state to reopen your application. And then just lastly, we wanted to share, if you are having technical problems, you can contact the support team at Submittable. This is the application platform that they're using. And this is the site here. And as we mentioned earlier, we will be following up with the presentation, recording to the webinar, or recording of the webinar. And so, all these links will be available to you.
Rowena, we have two questions in the chat that I think you can speak to. One is, I think you had mentioned earlier about how you can only use one email for one application at a time, and then you have to complete that. And then, if you're submitting multiple applications, if you could speak to that. And then also a question about the significance of the collaborator function in Submittable. Yeah.
So to the first point, if you are submitting for multiple sites, so if I'm submitting for, my 3 sites, in order for me to start my second application, I have to fully finish and submit my first application for the first site. It will not allow you to start another application with the same email address. You need to complete an application before you start the next one. So that means you do have to submit it, then make sure it's completed and submit to the state, and then you can start the next one.
Not totally convenient, but that is how apparently how it's set up. So we had a provider who attended our Tuesday evening session who was actually a center provider where this happened to them, where they were having difficulty applying for their additional sites. And so we got clarification about that part of the process. And also if if she was having trouble getting back in to apply for the other sites, and she was referred to Submittable.
Yeah. And then in terms of the collaborate feature on here, I mean, this is totally optional, and it is more to benefit, you if there are multiple people at your organization who would be best to, fill out and submit the budget, or, who, it would be helpful for, someone else to work on another part of the application, that's what that collaboration feature is for. It allows multiple people to work on different parts of the application. So hopefully that answers that question. Again, it's an optional feature. If you think that it would be beneficial for you and your organization, it's there, and you can invite multiple people to collaborate. All right, move on to the next I think Michelle will go over this piece.
Yeah, I feel like we covered SAM pretty well already in the content, and you showed the SAM website. When you're applying to the federal SAM website, you also have to request a DUNS number. We understand the DUNS number may take, they'll respond back to you with your number. That's your first step. It, is supposed to happen within 24 hours. We heard on Tuesday that somebody got theirs in an hour. So I think it just depends on, how many applications there are right then. But it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just, it feels bureaucratic and plug away. Like, we just encourage you, like, don't let this stuff deter you from applying when you think of the resources that could be made available to your program. So follow this process, and then can you show the next slide? And then on the SAM website, it's on that same page that we just showed, but this is at the bottom. There's a video about how to do your registration. So that is something that you could check out and maybe assign somebody in your organization to get busy on. So apply for SAM early. And then First Five it partnered with the local planning council to do the countywide ECE needs assessment, and we have a lot of data. We were aware that you plowing through hundreds of tables of data might not be the most useful thing for you when you're under stress for this. So we had members of our team, our data team, pull out tables by zip code of information that you may choose to use in your application. So this is not required. We just thought it might be useful, especially since the state's prioritizing deserts. So we have where all the deserts in the county are in the needs assessment, and we've Anna and KP put that in this zip code report, and the link to that zip code data is here. And Anna, if you could put it in the chat, that would be great. And we will also pass that out. We will also send it out when we send out these materials post webinar. But this is an example of, if you lived in this zip code, how you might frame sharing, that your childcare program is in this zip code, and you'll see the percentage of unmet need for spaces in that zip code, and whether it's a priority for the local planning council, and whether it's considered a childcare desert. I'll tell you, almost any place you live in you operate in the county is a childcare desert for infant and toddler care. So we're hearing some things from about this grant, that there's the Bay Area is more well supplied with licensed care. We have a long history in child care going back to World War II, and there's other parts of the state that are really undersupplied in care. But so you want to make your case about specifics of subsidized kids, and if you're doing infant toddler care in particular, making the case that you are in a desert, even though you're in Alameda County.
Mm-hmm. And just want to share too, like this, if you choose to use this, this would be something that you would add to your, I believe it's like your organization's, your agency's mission, vision.
Yeah, that program
piece.
mission
part,
yeah,
program description.
What you're trying to do, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying to understand you in context with other applicants, and we think data can always strengthen. And this is your data, this is our county data, so wanted to make sure we're sharing it with you. Oh, and I referenced this previously. So this is the state definition of low-income subsidy eligible. And this basically shows families that the eligibility threshold for state subsidies. Many families who are in this income bracket are eligible but aren't currently served. So if you are scholarshiping families in these categories, then that meets that criteria. And then it's by family size. Obviously, if it's a mom and one and a child, then their total household gross annual income of $70,688 means that if they're at that or below, they're considered low income for the purposes of this grant.
We did get, when we were talking about this component earlier, we did get a handful of questions about like, what if I don't check income? How am I verifying that? And just wanted to share that the state doesn't have guidance for verification of income, of low income status of families for the purposes of this grant application. So we do know that families that receive a state or federal subsidy, like the ones that we listed in the chat, would definitely be eligible. And then I think just also naming that there are families that you may be working with that you know are eligible. Maybe you haven't gone through like a rigorous process to check their income, but you know that they're eligible. And so those families would also be eligible. The state hasn't given guidance on like how you're supposed to be verifying their eligibility. And to some degree, I think that's intentional. It's like, there's some families we know are eligible, and then also there's some families that you work with that you know are eligible. And we want to make sure that folks are including those families in the count, as if they meet, if your understanding is that they meet these income thresholds.
And we had a question in the last webinar about what if it were a program who isn't in a low-income community, because a program in serving low-income communities is prioritized. So just being clear, you could be serving low-income families and not be in a low-income community, especially if you're in a hub of a place where a lot of families work. And so this is a place where in the narrative you're going to want to tell your story if you know you're serving a certain catchment, or if you had families that now are eligible, that you kept on and you reduced their tuition because they lost work during the pandemic. And I think there's ways for you to make sure that you're telling the story. But the state is going to prioritize based on numbers of subsidized and low-income families served. Next slide, Rona.
Not sure if okay, I can take this on. So just additional resources. Banana is one of our local resource and referral agencies. Translated the bunch of resources that DSS had made available. They translated them into Spanish and Chinese, if that is something of need to anyone. So the meeting PowerPoint is translated in Chinese, as well as some additional information, as well as the webinar. They translated that in Spanish. And then again, at the bottom, just wanted to highlight who to contact if you're having any technical problems with the application.
I just wanted to,
another resource that, yeah, go ahead on.
There's a lot of questions in the chat, and I just wanted to lift this up because this is, often a confusing issue. Is there's a lot of questions. We know that folks are prioritized if they serve infants and toddlers. And then there's questions like, well, this is my license. I have, 0 to 18 months or 0 to, 20 under 24 months. So in the application process, it doesn't clarify. It just says you're prioritized if you serve infants and toddlers. And I was wondering if anybody in this group or Michelle or Wina, if you had heard specifically how the state was defining infant toddler for the purposes of this process.
It'll be 24 and under. Like to the extent that LIF is managing this process, they're very familiar with like sort of the 0 to 2, 3 to 5. So 2 and under, and then so understanding that toddlers are toddlers, and so somebody, if they're looking at comparing these two projects in the same neighborhood that are both deserts, and this one's serving infants and this one's serving infants and toddlers and this one's serving just toddlers, they might go with the infant program. But that's unlikely to be the scenario of those of you who are applying in our county.
Thanks, Anna, for lifting that up. All right. And then just wanted to also share this other resource with you all. Build Up California had a kind of best practices webinar for childcare facilities. If you are still, thinking about looking for repair or renovations projects to do and to apply for, I think this webinar would be a great webinar to view. And they go through, various elements in your environment and provide suggestions on, the different types of renovations that can be done to create a quality environment. Let's see. Okay, and then as we showed earlier, this is the state website for the application and technical assistance. Yep, I think we can pop the link into the chat again. And just want to say that on this page, there is a reference to seeking support from planning councils and R&Rs and our resource and referral agencies and all of these entities, as much as us at First Five, would love to support our ECE community. Haven't always been given the resources or clarification on the RFA, so we are doing our best to respond to questions that we do have clarification and answers for, and in the event that we do not, we'll be collecting those and sending to the state. So just wanted to shout out to our local planning council and our R&R agencies for all of us doing as much as we can to support all of you providers. And then just information here on where to submit questions. And that, if you do have additional questions for the state, and we're going to be saving this chat and we'll collect them and also follow up with Q&A for the questions that we can't answer, and we'll see clarifications for the ones that we cannot.
Yeah, I saw, so yes, like we can't answer every project question. I did see questions in the chat on, an example of a project like our roof is leaking, and if we build a deck, like, is that like to solve the problem, is that allowable? I say if that's what your proposal is, you put it in your proposal, and it's possible that it would be partially funded, or they might approve it. You have to make your case about what is it about the repair that addresses the need for the facility, and what's it going to get you, and how's it going to benefit children.
I did put in the chat because some folks specifically with roofing questions, and there were a few like more structural questions. And to lift up here in conversation, a little bit later in the spring, there's going to be a similar grant application process for new construction and major renovations, which would include structural changes like increasing your square footage, decks, roofs, new walls, or building a new building, stuff like that. And so I've put a few times into the chat the link to where the state will be posting that information when it becomes available.
Someone's asking any word that the application deadline would be extended. We haven't heard that. I actually, on one hand, I wouldn't be surprised if it happened. On the other hand, I definitely wouldn't be surprised if it didn't happen. Like, they've got to move this money, and I expect they're going to get plenty of applications. So I would count on it as if you're meeting the deadline, and aim towards that March 25th deadline. And Sarah's was, oh, thank you for answering Sarah's question, Michael. Appreciate that. Just about your DUNS number being annual. And there's a question about when can we get the funds? So the the award process, the timeline for the award process is, they say, from March until September. So, and if there's questions about your application, or they're trying to figure out something about your project, they would be reaching out to you. There's also a requirement that you keep these funds segregated, so having a separate bank account to hold the grant funds and the earned interest on the funds. But that's something that would be set up once you received a grant award that you could establish. Were there any other questions that seemed that were just clarifications that we might be able to? I think there was a little bit there. I saw one question about budgets. What they're talking about, like if you're in a multi-service agency and they just want your childcare budget, they don't want the whole agency budget. They want the part that applies to childcare, and that applies to the California sites.
And I see a question just in there about someone in Franca says that she did not get how to get a DUNS number. And I believe that's part of the SAM
Yeah.
process. Like, so you can also register to get a DUNS number. Yeah, as part of the steps there. So if you go to sam.gov and start the process to register to receive a SAM number, the DUNS number is part of that process.
And Joni had a question about the playground renovation not requiring architectural drawing. You might still have drawings about like what kinds of modifications you're doing. Like some of the stuff is you're just going to have to use your best judgment. Like if it's a small scale, we know of centers that are saying like, I just need a shade. I need to like if we could install this shade structure, we could use more of our outdoor space. Like those are very simple, kind of straightforward proposals about what it's really almost an equipment and installation thing, as opposed to you're installing an entirely new playground structure, or you're adding new playground area that's age appropriate for infants and toddlers. Like that's like how you're managing your project, and fences and gates and all of those kinds of things are all possibilities for it could be a small scale thing, it could be a really large, security wise, some of those things can be really large, like even drainage systems, and window repair and those kinds of things can be small or really big projects. Neola asked what happened if for reasons beyond your control, you had to close prior to the 4-year requirement. Typically, there is a request to reimburse for a prorated use of the cost of the award. But let's hope that doesn't happen.
And I just put into the chat a link to the RFA, and this link is for the one in English. And on page 8 is or page 7, sorry. Page 7 is where it starts the allowable grant expenditures list. And it's a pretty long list of examples of the allowable uses. So I would say, review that if you have questions about the project.
Yeah, and I see Joni, you're asking like if you've applied for infant care to add infant care to your site, can you add it in? Absolutely. That I think you're prime candidate. Like if you're in progress or you're looking to do that and this would help you do that, make the case and get some of those costs. You know, if you're having to create your space for your the private napping area and that kind of thing, or for cribs and or to get cribs, those are all things that could be possibilities for your application.
Yeah, and actually it would be a prioritizing factor. So noted that in the chat. If folks are considering that would bump you up in terms of priority if it were a competitive process.
And it would help us not have as many deserts in the county for other care.
Right.
Somebody asked about new sites. This is for existing sites. And I think Anna, you had mentioned like the next round for expansion might be useful for that purpose. And we're expecting that the next grant round for expansion to come out this spring, so soon, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
They might want to get this all closed and then announce that. We'll see.
I had a great question from Deva in the chat about whether requested funds would be eligible for 100% grant or only a portion of it would be. And I think it's helpful to note that so it could be 100% grant. There's no matching requirement, but projects that do have some kind of matching, if you can speak to any kind of matching you can get, or in-kind matching, anything that you can be leveraging, that is a prioritizing factor. So definitely note that in your application process. If you've got somebody who's like, we're going to bake cookies to pay for the other fourth table leg or whatever, like speak to that, because they want to be prioritizing projects that are able to leverage additional funds in their application. So you don't need to have that in order to be eligible, but it would bump you up in terms of priority and make your application more competitive.
Thanks, Anna. Really good point.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody has said their project's under construction, they don't have before project pictures. Just explain that. Say that, totally fine. This is like how far along you are in your project.
We also got a question in the
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say we got a question in the chat about when folks will receive written responses to the chat questions, and I wanted to highlight again that we definitely don't know everything, and unfortunately not everything is clear in the guidance. So there is an email address, I'll put it in the chat, to direct questions that you have that we weren't able to answer today, or that we won't be able to include in follow-up information. It's probably because we're not sure and we don't want to be repeating or spreading misinformation. You can definitely reach out to the state with questions that you might have that are more specific. And if you get a good answer, I would consider encouraging them to put it on the frequently asked questions section of their website, because a lot of folks are having a lot of similar questions are coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and just also want to encourage people to apply and to keep going, despite you having questions. Yeah, if you're waiting for clarification, if you're waiting for clarification on a question that you have, keep going, keep moving along in the application. You want to make sure that you submit your application on time, and you include the information to the best of knowledge and the best information that you have. So definitely don't want you to miss out on submitting your application because you're waiting on the state for a response.
Or like some of these questions that have come up, you can see like our recommendation is just apply and explain where there's a barrier, and you don't, unless you're just flat out ineligible. And we didn't talk about faith-based programs, but like faith-based programs are eligible, and you just have to meet the state standards about not doing religious teaching in the classroom, like, and there's a language in the webinar and the background information about meeting those criteria. So I just think, like, don't assume you're not eligible. See how you can fit into the eligibility, and think of your projects, and think, like the whole thing, like equipment is the low-hanging fruit. Apply for equipment if you need something, and then think about what other projects that you need, and throw your hat in the ring. It seemed very clear from the state webinar that the state wants a big application pool for this. And having worked in government for some time, like, when you're putting money out to help the field, you want a big response so that you can make the case like the need is there, so that you can keep getting it funded. So these are one-time funds from the feds, but that doesn't mean this is the last go around for facilities. And so we really encourage you to apply. And then I would put a plug that First Five also has a facilities needs assessment out, because we're trying to get a lay of the land around what your facilities needs are. So this is all facilities all the time. We know the last thing you want to be doing right now is filling that out while you're filling out your applications. But we are trying to track where folks are having facilities problems. We know a lot of programs have deferred maintenance and have been through tough financial times over these last couple years, and just want to appreciate you all being there on the front line and taking care of families and kids. And we want to keep you in business. We want to support you, and we hope that you found this helpful at all. And we appreciate your questions and your answers to one another, and we learn from you every day.
Right.
And we're done early. How about that?
Yeah. All right.
Go apply for
Thank you again.
your exam.
Yeah. Start early if you haven't started already. And yeah, we'll follow up with folks, for everyone who registered for tonight, with the webinar recording, the presentation slides, and the resources that were shared. So yeah, we hope you found this information useful and supportive for your application. So thank you all for being with us tonight.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you, folks. Have a great
All right.
evening.
Have a good evening.
Good luck on your applications.
Yes.
Take care. Good luck.
Good night.
Thank you.